Welcome to Blackbriar Gaming. Today, we'll be looking at the 10th Legion, the Iron Hands, in the next video in our How to Build a Legion series. Hopefully, this is useful not only to those interested in the Iron Hands, but for all Legion players, giving them an understanding of the concepts behind army building in Horus Heresy, and an idea of what each Legion can bring to the table. I hope you enjoy. A quick note before we get into it, a subscribe and a like really helps us reach a bigger audience, so if you enjoyed the video, please hit those buttons down below. Also be sure to check out our affiliate link in the description. The Iron Hands, tenacious, unyielding, and driven by bitter vengeance. Betrayed on Istvaan, the 10th Legion play a really interesting part in the Heresy, forming the solid core of the Shattered Legions. The Iron Hands, bereft of their Primarch, carry on to pursue a brutal guerrilla campaign against the Traitors. Their lore is a lot of fun, and their aesthetic is steampunk meets grimdark. Their rules, super solid. Gotta love the Iron Hands, let's get into it. So first up, as we always do, let's talk about the Age of Darkness box set. Now you could definitely make a case both for or against buying the Age of Darkness set for making an Iron Hands army. It really comes down to the army you want to build and what kind of miniatures you want to include in your force. Importantly, it also comes down to how much money you want to spend, or how you want to source your miniatures. So let's delve into these statements a little more. The Iron Hands are one of only a few armies in Heresy that have special rules that encourage bringing vehicles along in an army. There's a few other legions, but Iron Hands really do it best. That's not to say their infantry aren't also fantastic, but their vehicles are actually worth taking. Similarly, they have a Legion special unit, the Medusan Immortals, that with the right of war not only become troops, but gain line. So it's entirely plausible, depending on which rite of war you go with, and what kind of army you're looking to build, to create an Iron Hands force that only uses a few miniatures from the Age of Darkness box set, and that would predominantly be the Dreadnought and the Spartan. In fact, with the Iron Hands looking, in this guy's opinion, far better in Mark III armor, I may almost recommend steering away from the Age of Darkness box set. The Iron Hands Forge World models are superb. The Immortals, their Gorgon Terminators, their Legion Dreadnought, the Iron Father miniature, and in particular, those Iron Hand specific Mark III armored lads. I would just want to kit out my entire force with them because I think they're amazing. All of it. It is peak Forge World design brilliance. Throw in a bunch of the new plastic tanks and you'll have yourself a stunning army on the tabletop. However, going down this route is not cheap. So if you're looking to build an Iron Hands force at an affordable price, you could definitely buy an Age of Darkness box set, throw it down on the table, and it's going to perform very adequately. It's got tanks, it's got dreadnoughts, it's got termies, it's got a whole bunch of infantry, all of the things Iron Hands want to be doing. In fact, if you're feeling creative, there's a bunch of third-party or 3D printed bits that'll turn those Mark VI boys into Iron Hand style breaches and give you a really thematic force. So, in summary, if you're cashed up, skip the Age of Darkness box set and buy bulk beautiful resin from Forge World. If you're looking at an army on a budget, the box set is just fine. Now, let's talk about why Iron Hands infantry and vehicles are some of the toughest in the game. The Iron Hands Legion rule, the Medusa's scale or Medusan scale? Hang on. Yep, Medusa scale. Okay, I had that right. I shouldn't have doubted myself. Very good. Medusa scales, it's super solid. Essentially, any enemy shooting attacks against your units that aren't vehicles, so yes, this includes dreadnoughts, are at -1 strength. So bolters are only wounding your marines on 5+, and las cannons are only wounding your contempted dreadnoughts on a 3+. There's plenty of times when this will come in handy, but also some times when it won't. Any high-strength weaponry, such as plasma, crack missiles, las cannons, will still be wounding your infantry on a 2+. However, anything at strength 8, which is pretty common, won't be causing instant death on your multi-wound infantry when shooting at them, which is really nice. Remember that it's also only against shooting attacks, as I said, so once you're in combat, you're getting 0 benefits from your Legion rule. Keep that in mind as we discuss the rest of this army build. Now, the second part of the rule is that vehicles get, because that wasn't enough, the second part is that vehicles get it will not die 6+, which means at the end of your turn, I believe, you roll a dice, and if you roll a 6+, or it can be improved, that vehicle gets a hull point back, and you get to roll that for any of your vehicles that have lost a hull point. Now, on its own, it's not overly impressive, but when combined with the blessed auto simulacra. There we go. A blessed auto simulacra. An Iron Hand specific upgrade. You get to It Will Not Die 5+, and now you've got a 1/3 chance to get that hull point back. Or, if you bring Ferrous Manus, you're getting a mighty It Will Not Die 4+ on all of your vehicles for no points whatsoever except the cost of the Primarch, which feels pretty good. It's 50-50 chance to get those hull points back. So as long as your vehicles aren't getting penetrated and blown up, they can really stick around and be an absolute pain for your opponent. So, what does this all mean for army building? A few things, actually. An Iron Hand's force does best as a predominantly shooting army, I believe. You have 0 advantages in combat, and while their Legion-specific Terminator unit, the Gorgon Terminators, are relatively cheap points-wise, they're also relatively average game-wise. So your assault unit, the Gorgon Terminators, they're just not that great. Unless you survive the first round of combat and you get a lucky blind off on your opponent, your Gorgons aren't going to overcome any decent combat units. Similarly, the Iron Hand's advanced reaction is shooting focused. It's a souped up Overwatch. You want units that can take advantage of it, so I'm leaning towards shooting here. So with your infantry being tougher, you're more than happy to get into some bolter-on-bolter mid-range firefights. Especially your 2-wound infantry, but even your 1-wound infantry is really going to benefit from not being instant death on strength 8 shooting. Now why, you ask? And the answer is feel no pain. Your feel no pains are going to be on against enemy strength 8 shooting. Pack out the squads that can take them with apothecaries to make them extra tough. Same, a lot of the special units for the Iron Hands, well, all of them if you will, come with Feel No Pain base as well, so your enemy can't snipe out apothecaries to take it away. They're tough. They're a tough army. 2-win infantry is obviously great when your opponent is at -1 strength to their shooting, so yes, Terminators, but I'm more interested actually in Iron Hands veterans, especially armed with Nemesis bolters or combi weapons. I think they can be really good. Means your opponent's going to have to shoot a las cannon at them to instant kill your veterans, and that's not really point cost effective at that point. So even if your guys are dying to las cannons, it means they're shooting at your cheap-ish veterans as opposed to your vehicles, so you just don't mind that much. Now, if for some reason you don't select the Company of Bitter Iron Rite of War, and more on that later, then breaches are very Iron Handsy. It's the theme, right? So breaches and tacticals for your line troops, heavy support squads to achieve that range overmatch, make your opponent come to you. You can't have a shooting army without some heavy support squads in it. They're just so good. You can, okay, fine, you can, but you shouldn't. Las cannons and Volkite culverins are generally my go-to, but if you don't want to be a slave to the meta, then missile launchers and autocannons, they're great too. So we have veterans, breaches, tacticals, heavy support squads, dreadnoughts, chuck some dreadnoughts in there, they're great, and Iron Hand dreads are up there as some of the best in the game, with -1 strength to your opponent's shooting, simply being obnoxious at toughness 7 or even worse at toughness 8 on your Leviathans. Just brutal. Don't forget the Deradeo Dreadnought, it's a Dreadnought too in the heavy sport slot. When building your Iron Hands army, bring that along, so survivable when your opponent's at -1 strength. Now, we get to the vehicles, talking about survivable. The key here is to make sure your opponent is not going to penetrate and explode your tanks. So you can get to take advantage of the Will Not Die shenanigans at the end of your turn. It Will Not Die also works better in bulk, so reasonably priced Armor 13 and 14 vehicles are probably the go-to. Predators, Scorpius, Sicarans, and Land Raider Proteuses are probably the optimal choices in an Iron Hands army, but look, if you've got a Spartan kicking around, then chucking a 20-strong unit of Immortals in it isn't a terrible choice. Or Ferrous Manus and a retinue of Terminators. If you're playing a bigger game, you're going to use that Spartan. So now that we understand what the Iron Hands are trying to achieve, let's look at their rites of war. There are 2 Iron Hand rites of war. Let's start with the potentially more interesting, but also less competitive of the 2, the Head of the Gorgon. The irony, got to love it. So the Head of the Gorgon, what are the effects? All models with the infantry unit type in this detachment gain the Stubborn special rule while within their own deployment zone. Very nice. Any model with the infantry unit type with flamers may exchange them for graviton guns or graviton shredders at 15 points per model. Next up, you can take some Castellax Battle Automator as an elite choice, and they gain the It Will Not Die 5+ special rule at no additional points cost. Nice. Any Iron Fathers or Legion Tech Marines may take a Cortex controller so they can jump in with the Castellax there. And lastly, for the effects, any model with the vehicle unit type in this attachment gains the Outflank special rule. Okay, limitations, only select a single fast attack choice, and you do not get to attempt to seize the initiative, which is it's a little sad. It's a hit. It's a bit of a hit. So, this Rite of War leans into things that Iron Hands are best at. Shooting infantry who are happy to stay in their deployment zone, and vehicles who get just that bit spicier from gaining outflank. Stubborn is a very important rule in this edition. It protects against night fighting and shell shock, two very relevant rules at the moment. It means your infantry units are generally going to keep moving and keep shooting when you want them to. With this in mind, I'd be building ahead of the Gorgon army around night fighting, as you aren't taking the leadership hit in those first couple of turns in deployment zone while your opponent is. Sneaky searchlights on rhinos and some cognoscignums on tech marines, which the Iron Hands are all about anyway. Make sure you're prepared to take advantage of night fighting, likely gaining a shooting and leadership edge over your opponent. Night fighting is your friend. But that's not all. Oh no. Being able to take full support squads with graviton guns or shredders is super tasty. You're definitely taking a unit of these guys, unless for some reason no one's taking dreadnoughts, who you play, but I just don't think that's the case. Now, while Iron Hands can get plenty of graviton elsewhere, which we'll discuss later on, a whole support squad putting down 10 haywire small blast markers, it's just outrageous. And it shuts down the battlefield as well. Don't forget the difficult and dangerous terrain that you're putting all over the place with those blast markers. In a Dreadnought heavy meta, this squad can absolutely punish that opponent that brings 2 or more Dreads to a game, and you'll never feel bad, because they'll deserve it. Now, it's a tough choice between the Graviton Guns and the Shredders. Graviton Guns are heavy, but they let you potentially avoid a next turn charge with their 18-inch range, and placing the enemy unit in difficult and dangerous terrain is just really nice, and it means it can be really useful against infantry, as well as Dreadnoughts and tanks. Graviton Shredders give you a bit more flexibility and a bit more firepower with their Assault 2, but they only have a 12-inch range. Both are great choices, and it comes down to how you want to run the unit, especially whether they're in or out of a transport, and also how the unit fits into your wider army. Next up, you get to take some Castellax. The gain it will not die 5+. So tough. And take an Iron Father or Tech Marine with them with that Cortex controller. Now, a unit of Castellax with Darkfire cannons, supported by a Tech Marine with a Cognoscignum, so they're now hitting on 2+. This seems like a really nice way to get some AP2 shooting into your army. Yes, it's an expensive unit that you can't give line to, but it's also wonderfully narrative for the Iron Hands, and getting some AP2 on bulk like that, not that it's that bulk because these guys are expensive, it's rare. It's rare for a Legion force. Honestly, however, if you really want some Mechanicum flavor in your army, it's probably better to take an allied Mechanicum detachment. Iron Hands and Mechanicum are sworn brothers, so you can still pull off some independent character sharing shenanigans with this Rite of War, because as they have a Cortex controller, they can still go in the Mechanicum units. And Castellax in a Cybernetica-themed Mechanicum force are going to be far more useful, getting access to reactions and gaining line, even if you lose out on the Will Not Die 5+ bonus. Look, it's a toss-up. That it will not die is not nothing, but line is so important in this game. Lastly, your vehicles gaining outflank gives you some options for mid-game shenanigans. However, as vehicles in this Rite of War will never count towards objectives, and with most weapons on vehicles having decent range, you just don't gain that much from outflanking vehicles. There are 2 questionable benefits here. It theoretically allows you to set up some shots on enemy vehicle side armor on the turn you arrive, but as you have to telegraph where you're turning up, an opponent can plan for this. Vehicles also aren't that popular for legions that aren't you, so more than likely you're shooting at infantry when you rock up anyway. Next benefit is that it allows you to hold your vehicles back and take out your opponent's subsequently ineffectual anti-tank shooting in that first turn or 2 before your vehicles show up. Personally, I think the costs outweigh the benefits here, predominantly that you're losing out on shooting power in the first few turns, and that your tanks are vulnerable to counter-assault if they're turning up on an opponent's flank. I'm not quite sold. If it allowed units in transports to gain outflank, then it would have been really nice, but I don't believe it does. Now, please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but if you've got a unit of Terminators, you stick them in a Land Raider, that Land Raider gains outflank, I don't believe you're still able to outflank with that unit, because the Terminators don't have it, and therefore it's not the whole unit, so they can't do it. If I'm wrong, please let me know, because suddenly if that Terminator squad can outflank because their Land Raider has it, well, that's fantastic. So let me know in the comments below. I just think tanks are better off starting on the battlefield. They're putting down firepower, which is what the rest of your army is doing. It gives you that shooting overmatch that you really need to make your opponent come to you. In summary, ahead of the Gorgon army is made up of shooting-based infantry, both long and mid-range, some of the tanks we've already talked about, Scorpions and Predators, my preference here, 1 or 2 Dreads because they're fantastic in an Iron Hands army, and a smattering of HQ characters that open up the rights of war in the first place and buff your shooting. Master of Signals, great choice. A decent Rite of War with some options that boost what you already want to be doing with your Iron Hands. Head of the Gorgon, can recommend. Now, next up is the Rite of War that I think is a bit more fun. It is the Company of Bitter Iron. Let's look at the effects. So a detachment using this Rite of War may take Medusan Immortals as troop choices. So spicy. All models in any Medusan Immortal squad selected as a troop choice, gain the Line Unit subtype and the Heart of the Legion special rule. That is +1 to their Feel No Pains when within 6 of an objective. All models in a detachment using this Rite of War and their Iron Hands, they gain Hatred if they have Bitter Duty. All miniatures with Bitter Duty special rule also gain Hatred Traitors special rule. And finally, any models with both the independent character and Legion Astartes Iron Hands special rule may be given the Bitter Duty special rule for no additional cost. Limitations, only used in an army that has a Loyalist allegiance, and you cannot take Ferrus Manus. So if you want to take Ferrus Manus, you are taking the Head of the Gorgon, which is just fine. Let's take a closer look at the Medusan Immortals, shall we? So, for only 3 points more than a Breacher Marine, you get an extra attack, Leadership 10, Stubborn, Feel No Pain 5+, and Bitter Duty, which we know gives us Hatred, Traitors. Okay. It means you can include a Moritat, but also any other independent character, as you can give them Bitter Duty in this Rite of War. More on this later. Okay, Medusan Immortals also differ from Breachers in that they can swap their bolters for a chainsword for free, which, at 4 attacks on the charge, doesn't seem like a terrible option in the right circumstances. With the Company of Bitter Iron turning Immortals into troops, giving them Line and Heart of the Legion, increasing their Feel No Pain to 4+ when within 6 of an objective, these lads become a very solid choice. They're not that expensive, and they're so good. You can also take them in units of 20. A couple of big units of Immortals are going to be super hard for your opponent to shift, especially with shooting. As an example, a 10-strong heavy support squad with missile launchers, often the bane of power armored Space Marines, is on average only going to kill 1 or 2 of your Immortals when you're near an objective. And those numbers go down if you've turned night fighting on, which you definitely will, because your Immortals are stubborn. We've talked about the night fighting piece, this army does it well. These guys are tough. Oh, and of course the hatred piece, there. So, in a narrative tournament, when you're usually facing off against Traitors, and these are the only tournaments I play in, you're re-rolling hit rolls in your first round of combat. I'm starting to think chainswords may indeed be the way to go with these guys. Pack 10 of them in a Proteus, or a full squad of 20 in a Spartan, charge them towards the enemy and onto an objective. You can't really go wrong. They're going to be so hard to kill, and they're going to do some decent damage. In this way, this Rite of War can be a far more aggressive way to play the Iron Hands. Fill your army with Medusan Immortals, Gorgons just because the models are great, Dreadnoughts and Land Raiders, then charge forward at full speed. Now, those Moritats I mentioned before, just because you can take them in an Immortal squad doesn't necessarily mean you should. The key reason is that you can't assault after using their Chainfire special rule, and they're invariably wanting to be shooting at a vehicle or Dreadnought, which you don't want your Immortals necessarily to be charging. So perhaps bringing a Destroy squad along for your Moritat to hang out with is the better choice. Also, Destroyer squads, Iron Hands, do pretty well in this Rite of War because you can give Bitter Duty to any of your consoles, essentially, or any of your Praetors characters. So Destroyer squads go up because suddenly you can buff them with something like a Chaplain, for instance. So it gets a bit more interesting. Now, why are you taking that Moritat? I keep talking about the Moritat. Well, let's look at the Iron Hands Armory section to see why. The Iron Hands have some great options in the armory. Firstly, the Iron Father option, while expensive, is fantastic. and too narratively wonderful not to take. Remember, if you take him as part of the company of Bitter Iron Force, he can have the Bitter Duty rule for free, which lets him join the Immortals, which he can't normally do outside of this Rite of War, which is a bit sad, it is what it is, and gets access to Hatred Traitors. The Iron Father hits like a truck, especially when he has Hatred, and with the potential 3+ invulnerable save and 5+ feel no pain inbuilt, is one of the toughest Praetors out there. This word again, Blessed Auto Simulacra, I did much better that time, that we've talked about already. It's only 10 points, and it takes your It Will Not Die rolls for your vehicles to 5+. I think you're always taking these on anything more expensive than a Rhino, unless of course you brought Ferris along, and then you don't need to waste the points. He does it better for all your vehicles for free. Getting access to Cyber Familiars for any of your characters is absolutely fantastic. That was a cheeky little inclusion for these guys. It's not cheap at 20 points, but I think it's worth it for that extra pip on your invul save for your consoles. With so many sniper rifles kicking around, Nemesis bolters, I should say, that extra kind of save to take most of your consoles to a 4+, and those in Terminator armor to a 3+, I think it's pretty good. I think it's worth it. Your Iron Father gets a Cyber Familiar for free, or at least it's included in his cost, kind of justifies his 65 point upgrade, because you definitely want to take this on your Praetor. Gorgon Terminator armor. Now you can take this for anyone. It's a solid choice. So while it's only a 5+ invul save, you get a 5+ feel no pain built in. That's really cool. And of course the small potential to blind your opponents, which sounds silly. It's not going to happen very often, but when it gets off, oh my goodness, it's fantastic. It reduces your opponent to weapon skill 1, which is so punishing. The Feel No Pain, it's pretty nice. I definitely consider taking this on any consoles I was planning to smatter across the army if they were consoles that could take Terminator armor, or more so if they were Cataphracti Centurions that could take the console upgrade that you were interested in. Now, finally, the Moritat. We get to the Moritat. Not finally, but we get to the Moritat that I keep mentioning. The Iron Hands Moritat is hands down the best Moritat in the game. Why, you ask? Well, because you can replace their plasma pistols with graviton pistols, which don't have either the Gets Hot or Armorbane special rule, but does have the Haywire special rule. So the Gets Hot Armorbane thing, if you roll a 1 usually on your Chainfire for your Moritat, which you usually take pistols that have Gets Hot or Armorbane because they're good. They're the only good ones. If you roll a 1, you stop firing, and you have to take the Gets Hot situation. So, in this case, because the Graviton pistol does not have Gets Hot or Armorbane, you can just keep firing it. So you just roll your 12 dice. You don't care. And on 2s, you're doing damage, and on 1s, you're not, but you don't mind. So if you line up a chainfire attack with your Graviton pistols, you're essentially, I'm not going to say guaranteed, but on averages, you're putting down a Contempted Dreadnought every single time you fire at it. Every single shooting phase, you're putting down a Contempted Dreadnought. It is absolutely brutal. There is no better anti-Dreadnought unit in the game. If you're bringing Iron Hands to the table, I suggest you're bringing in an Iron Hands Moritat with 2 Graviton pistols every single time. Now keep in mind, other characters can replace their plasma pistols with a Graviton pistol too, and that infantry units that can take Graviton guns can take Graviton Shredders instead, which is a very solid option for breaches and veterans, because it gets around the fact that Graviton guns are heavy. Noting that veterans are relentless. Okay, they don't mind so much, but it's Assault 2. It's Assault 2, people. So for breaches, it's very good. For veterans, there's a choice. They're both good. Finally, because there's just so much to talk about here for the armory, is the Armatus Necrotechnica. Got that one right. Now, I'm not sure if it's worth the 50 points. Have a read, please. Do yourself a favor. Go in, have a read of the fluff text for this thing. It's so cool. It's so grimdark. I love it. Your vehicles already have It Will Not Die, so for 50 points to try and restore hull points by eating the dead, I'm not sure it's worth it. It does have that little reduction of leadership, -1 leadership to non-stubborn or fearless units within 6, which is good. A pseudo-fear mechanic is nice, but I'd probably leave this one at home just because 50 points is a bit obnoxious on top of a vehicle that's almost definitely going to get targeted and blown up. And that's just about everything I'm keen to talk about for the Iron Hands. We've looked at their army builds, their special rules, their rites of war, how they interact with the Age of Darkness box set, the armory. They're an army that encourages bringing vehicles to the tabletop, which is quite rare, while also having rock-hard infantry, so they're really nice. They're a really nice balanced force. They look fantastic on the tabletop. Their Rise of War are both powerful in their own ways, and their armory options are some of the best across the legions. In a Dreadnought meta, the Iron Hands and their fetish for grav weapons are a powerful counter. I think there's more to come for the Iron Hands soon. Obviously, they have no characters of their own. We'll have to get some eventually. Surely GW are going to be hitting up the Iron Hands pretty quickly as they start releasing new units and new characters. So I'd love to see the Iron Hands get some love. Now, if there's anything I've missed for the Iron Hands that you think bears mentioning, please put it in the comments below. Importantly, make sure to keep rolling those dice and getting hyped for Heresy.